Trade rumors are intensifying as multiple insiders have reported that the New York Rangers are looking to acquire a familiar face to Rangers fans, and the return could have serious implications on the Rangers lineup, not only this season, but in the future. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 74% of you who watch these videos are not actually subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything New York Rangers, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Now, there's a lot of trade rumors flying around because of what's happening with the Vancouver Canucks, and we'll get into their situation a little bit. But in regards to the New York Rangers, there's been multiple reporters who have come out, not just reporters, but media members like Paul Bissonnette as well, that are stating that the Rangers are kicking tires on JT Miller. And we actually have a, blockbuster trade potentially on our hands here that could involve Mika Zibanejad, K'Andre Miller for JT Miller. So a little Miller for Miller action there in way of a trade. But Nick Kypreos says that JT Miller has one destination he would waive his no movement clause to make a trade, and that is the New York Rangers. Now, alternatively, like I brought up, Paul Bissonnette went on his podcast, Spitting Chicklets, and said that Chris Drury, at this point, it sounds like he would almost do anything possible to get JT Miller. So this sounds like it is definitely in the works. Now, if you look at the Canucks side of things, and this is from Kypreos as well, and I mean, multiple insiders have it. What's coming out of Vancouver the last couple of days is absolutely insane. But the Canucks are leaning towards a major roster change. He adds, don't be surprised if we start hearing the Canucks are willing to take calls on Miller. And I don't think that they're willing to start taking calls on JT Miller. I think that they have, and I think this is actively in the works with not just the Rangers, but other teams around the NHL. Now, if you look at JT Miller, former New York Ranger, you know exactly what you're getting in him. He's a little bit older. We'll get into his stats in a second, but in terms of a trade with the Vancouver Canucks, the Canucks have a lot of injury troubles on defense. Their defense core is not good enough right now for a team that has playoff aspirations and obviously contending, right? They have aspirations of being a contender. Now, K'Andre Miller would fit in great on that team. We could take a look at his stats. This season, obviously, he's a big body, a left shot. He's still relatively young. He's going to need a contract extension this summer. He only has 6 points in 31 games so far this season. Obviously logs a lot of ice time. Rangers fans know about this guy, and a -8 on the season. He hasn't had a good season by any stretch, and it's more about his hockey IQ than anything else. I mean, this is a guy who's, been to 2 conference finals. He looked like he was on the upswing, like he was going to develop into this great stalwart defenseman back there for the New York Rangers, and that hasn't happened, and he's about to turn 25. So this is a guy that I don't know, his agent says he wants a significant raise. I don't know if you're the Rangers, if you can give him a significant raise or if that makes any type of sense at this point in time. So maybe there is potential for a trade here. Now, in terms of Mika Zibanejad, to touch on that quickly, I don't see him wanting to go to Vancouver. I don't see Vancouver wanting to take on that contract either. I don't know if they necessarily need center help. There is a world where they're looking at trading Elias Pettersson right now, but they won't trade JT Miller if they trade Elias Pettersson. So I think that is very interesting there with Mika Zibanejad. There is a real world where that could work out, but I don't know about the Zibanejad part of that. But this is from the Nick Kypreos podcast as well. And Phil Kosher, thank you so much for putting these out on Twitter. The Canucks and the New York Rangers have talked about JT Miller for the past 2 years at the trade deadline, the past 2 seasons at the trade deadline. So where there is smoke, there is fire. This could get done this season, and it could get done soon because Chris Drury wants a major shakeup. The Canucks have asked for names like Lafreniere and Schneider in the past, which, if you ask me, I don't want to say untouchable with Lafreniere, but Schneider, to me, is almost as close to untouchable as you can get. This is a guy you need on your defense court, right shot, and he's only going to get better. He's still very young. So I don't think K'Andre Miller is a guy that interests them, but things can change. Now, that's very interesting, although I do think that they could use a guy like K'Andre Miller on their blue line, especially with the injuries they have and the fact that even when they're healthy, I think they still want to go out and make a trade at the trade deadline. So I think K'Andre Miller could be a guy that they're looking at, but it wouldn't just be Miller for Miller. That wouldn't make sense. So there would be more to the trade, I believe that. And on the side of K'Andre Miller, before we move on to JT Miller, because I feel like JT Miller, a lot of fans already know about JT Miller, but we can get into everything with him. But K'Andre Miller played, and this is last night against the Boston Bruins, 23 minutes tonight, and he had a 58.7 expected goals percentage, a majority of them against David Pastrnak, who had 30%. It's nights like these that make you hesitant to want to give up on him. This is the stuff I was talking about earlier in the season when he was having a terrible go earlier this season, and still kind of is, right? It really hasn't picked it up, especially after his injury. There is still something to this player, but he only gives you glimpses, right? There's only, sometimes you'll watch him and you're like, wow, this guy can really, really be something. But for the majority of the time with the New York Rangers in the last couple of years, it hasn't been good, and he hasn't really taken steps. So there are times like last night where you go, wow, he had a fantastic game, but he has a hard time stringing those performances together. But that is something to consider. And I mean, he's been thrown around in trade talks and rumors a lot the last couple of weeks. I mean, there's potential packages for K'Andre Miller from Mason McTavish. I'm sure there would have to be more included in that. There's another report from Kevin Weeks saying that I'm not saying they are or they aren't trading him. I'm just saying it's a name that I've heard out there. So his name has definitely been kicked around in trade circles. So K'Andre Miller is definitely, I wouldn't say necessarily on the trade block, but he's definitely being put out there maybe in the mix for some other trades, right? And one thing we know for sure, and this is from Vince Mercogliano, is the worst thing that the New York Rangers can do to try and stop the bleeding is short-term band-aids or moves like Will Borgen, right? Like, that's the worst thing that they can do. They have to do something here, especially if they want to save this season, which I'm not too concerned with this season. I'm more concerned about the future and the fact that when all these new contracts kick in, and if they do re-sign K'Andre Miller, if they don't trade him coming up here, what the team looks like at that point. I'm more worried about that the next 5 years, not necessarily this year. But if they do want to save this year and, retool for the next 5 years, they got to do something. They got to make a splash. They got to make a move here. Maybe it's JT Miller. I think he would certainly help in terms of on-ice play. That's for sure. Like, he would make an immediate impact. I believe that. But, again, the short-term Band-Aids are not the answer. Now, if we take a look at JT Miller, we know what we're getting in him. He's a little bit older than the last time New York Rangers fans saw him. He's played 27 games this season. He has 25 points. He's almost a point-a-game player. -2. Vancouver hasn't been that great this year. He plays a lot on the power play. We know that. Plays quite a bit, upwards of 18 minutes a night averaging this season. He did just come off of a leave of absence, which there was a lot of mystery around that. And obviously we know now in Vancouver, there's a lot being made about, his friction, I'll call it, with Elias Pettersson there in the dressing room, and how things are coming to a head there. And one of them will probably be moved pretty soon. But again, I am a little bit concerned. I think that the New York Rangers could go out and get a guy like this and he would help immediately, but he's going to be 32. He's getting older. The Rangers have a lot of guys in this age range, and I think that they want to, slowly at some point, whether it's this year or next year, move away from guys in this age range and try and get younger and bring in some more speed, some more talent. Now, so I think JT Miller could absolutely help in the short term. Right now, absolutely. Could even try and help turn the season around. But in terms of, long-term plans, not sure that makes too much sense. He also comes with a pretty hefty price tag, so you're going to have to maybe not make room, because obviously the Rangers have been doing that all year with trades like Jacob Trouba, but and obviously Capo Caco didn't free up too much room, but obviously moving pieces off the roster, they can make it work, especially with their deadline cap space. They have a ton, but again, I'm a little bit concerned about a move like that just because of age and where everything's going. And obviously everything that's come out of Vancouver right now, I'm not sure if things would mesh well in New York. So I'm a little bit concerned, but short term, I think he would definitely help, and he could maybe potentially get this season back on track. But let me know in the comments what you think. I think it's a very interesting option. It sounds like it's actually more likely than not to happen at this point, because Chris Drury wants this player, and the Vancouver Canucks could use some help as well via a trade. And obviously, I think they got to move off of one of those players. It's coming to a head. So let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.